Hi, I'm Dan McKay. I'm a reporter with the Albuquerque Journal, and I'm here with my colleague and supervisor, Dan Boyd. He's the Journal Capitol Bureau Chief. So we had a pretty hectic first week here at the legislature, and it started, in fact, even before the session was gavelled in on Tuesday. We had a pretty busy Monday. Almost all of the lawmakers were here on Monday. Dan, what did you see on Monday? Why were they here so early?
Well, Monday was significant. Top-ranking legislators approved a new policy for harassment for the first time in 10 years that they've done that, kind of in the wake of a lot of news and scrutiny of sexual misconduct issues. They also underwent training for the first time since 2004 on harassment. So that kind of set the tone, brought everybody here a day earlier than usual, and then things kicked off officially at noon on Tuesday with, per the Constitution, the session started and the governor came in and gave her final State of the State address.
Yeah, so the legislators learned good tips like the 2-second rule for hugging. I'm going to use it in my personal life as well. Don't hug longer than 2 seconds, excuse me.
2 minutes might be a little too long.
So the State of the State on Tuesday, that's always one of the big attraction. It takes all afternoon basically setting up and getting everybody ready for it. And it's the governor's chance to lay out her agenda. She has a lot of authority over what lawmakers do in a short session like this one, a 30-day session. What did you hear from the governor on Tuesday in terms of tone? Anything new? What jumped out at you?
Yeah, in some ways there weren't a lot of surprises as far as content. She really focused on crime issues, the economy, and education, kind of her three main topics. But I think in tone, it was 54 minutes, her longest speech, her longest State of the State. And as I wrote in the paper, I described it as a kind of upbeat but unrelenting. She clearly is not going to give up on some of her top issues in her final year in office, even though a lot of those probably face uphill odds trying to get through the legislature. And I think she did try to crack a few jokes about the legislature suing her, things like that. So she tried to make it a little light. Democrats said they'd heard a lot of the ideas before, so in that way it wasn't too new. But she also did drop a little bit of knowledge that people hadn't heard about state maybe even having more new money than we'd previously thought, up to $330 million for next year.
So the prospect of a little easier budget session seems to have put people in a little bit better mood this year in contrast to last year. One of the things we saw in this first week is that the legislature moved really quickly to adopt a multi-state nursing compact. It basically allows nurses who are licensed in other states to continue practicing in New Mexico. And of course, it works vice versa. The old agreement was expiring, so it was critical to get this new compact signed by Friday. And the legislature managed to beat the deadline, but just barely. There was a lot of kind of a celebratory feeling yesterday, especially that they managed to get it done, despite a lot of questions they had about whether the compact was the right thing to do and whatnot.
And that's pretty rare, I think, for them to move that quickly on something, to get a bill to the governor on something significant like that and have her sign it 3 days into a session is not something you usually see. Usually it's not until weeks into a session that any bills land on her desk. It sounded like from you covering it that there were some attempts to maybe amend it, some legal questions about it, but in the end it all worked out.
There may be some undercurrents of dispute that might be hitting the session at some point. There was a leadership change just before this session. Democrats in the Senate elected a new majority whip, Mimi Stewart. She's a Democrat from Albuquerque, and there was a news story by the Associated Press taking note of the fact that this was an all-white leadership team for Senate Democrats in a heavily Hispanic state. And shortly after that, I don't know whether this is a coincidence or if perhaps it's a sign of things to come, but there is actually a new caucus being formed, which my colleague Dan wrote about.
Yeah, and I don't think it was a total coincidence. A new legislative Hispanic caucus, which there's been an informal one in the past, but not recently. And Senator Jacob Candelaria announced yesterday, on Thursday on the floor, the creation of this new caucus, which is bipartisan. The Lieutenant Governor, John Sanchez, also said he'll be a member of that. Kind of remains to be seen how that'll work going forward, what kind of issues they would take on, and how often they would meet, things like that. But that is one development we're keeping an eye on that was interesting. They said they'll accept anyone into their membership, that it won't be kind of an exclusive caucus, but kind of an interesting twist to this first week.
And caucuses are important because they're sort of informal meeting groups where legislators will hash out their positions on things. They happen in private, so we don't have access to them, but they can be an important factor in the legislature. So we've got 1 week down. We've got about 3 to go. What do you see on the horizon? What's the big news for next week?
I think the big thing next week, the committees will start really cranking up, to start feeling more into that kind of session grind. Big thing we'll be watching for, new revenue estimates will be unveiled next week. As I mentioned, the governor already kind of hinted at those, but we'll get official numbers, should be presented next Wednesday to a House committee. So we'll be keeping a close eye on that. But I think for now, we're going to plan to sleep up a little bit and get ready for the heart of the session coming up.
You can almost certainly tell that I'm already a little haggard than I was a week ago. There weren't any late nights this week, but there were some early mornings. And it can get a little tense around deadline time trying to get everything done. We thank you guys for watching the video. We hope you'll follow us on Twitter and online and in the newspaper. We do have our own legislative webpage up, which has videos, stories, photos, all kinds of stuff. That's abqjournal.com/legislature. And we hope you guys will keep following along.
Just 26 days to go.